it looks like on this low level of project structure, you need to find ways and means to agree on all this, to marry different approaches which are other. So, Beryl, how's situation is in your institution? Do you have special KPIs in terms of both profit making and in terms of green financial projects?
Yes, at AFD we have a strong signature actually on climate finance, since we did commit to have 50% of our portfolio with climate co-benefits, which is important.
Very important, yeah, I agree.
And we also commit to have 30% of our climate finance dedicated to biodiversity. So we know well at AFD what it is to combine all these KPIs and then deliver on the ground with impact for our clients and beneficiaries. But let me also come back on your questions. How can this be enabler
Yeah,
of SDG alignment? And I believe on this there is a combination of financial and non-financial services. On financial services, we have a range of financial instruments to deploy, which is most helpful to reorient. Sorry. Thank you. To reorient your client strategies, of course, bonds to mobilize the capital markets and align in a way the whole financial chain, and of course loans and credit lines to your beneficiaries that you could link to impact on the grounds, and link the interest rates to the achievement of impacts. So really you have a bunch of financial instruments to really yes, to really enable the reorientation of financial flows and the reorientation of your clients and beneficiaries. And of course, you have the non-financial services, which is, I think, really important to build the capacities of your beneficiaries to do more on climate and SDGs. And here again, you have a range of tools coming from what is a climate strategy to how to integrate risk into your credit process, how to monitor and track impacts, and so on. So really, it's a combination of these two financial and non-financial services with a mix of blended and innovative finance that will enable us to deliver on the ground on this very important topic of SDG and Paris alignment.
Thank you very much, Anton. Now I want to your comments on our discussions. As a government employees and representing the federal ministry, I am sure that you think that ministries are more important as enablers in terms of green transition, climate financing, and so on and so forth, or managing climate risk. So, but how do you feel? Really, who is much more important, the government bodies as enablers, or national financial institutions or state-controlled national financial institutions as enablers for ECG transition or green climate transition?
Well, maybe I'll surprise you, but I'm going to be one of those government people who says that, you know, there's only so much that governments can actually do, right? We can set the incentives, we can put the necessary regulation in place, we can have targets, we can have, we can set the pathways for the country, and we can say where we would like to go. But for the green transition, for the sustainability, right? And specifically for, I'm going to come back to this in a second. So I think that in terms of enabling policy banks and the financial system in general is crucial, because I mean, and I think it's no surprise that the shift towards sustainability is happening in the financial sector globally faster than in some other areas where it may sometimes lag behind, because for people in finance, especially for people in public finance, especially for people in long-term public finance, you think about long-term risks. And I think that if anything, what the climate agenda, what the sustainable agenda does is it sets out a roadmap for long-term environmental and social risks for economic activities. And I think that banks are the first ones to be concerned about that and to think about that and to bring that to the project proponents, to the private sector, demonstrating like, look, these are the risks that we're going to see, and here is how they are going to be quantified. So there's of course both a role in equity, and there's definitely a role in technical assistance and expertise. And I think this is where, for example, Sergey, your institution, VEB, was crucial in setting up Russia's architecture for sustainable finance, because this was the methodological center for our work. It was a very important role that our PDB played. But I think what governments can do and what they have to do and what they can translate to PDBs and to the economy in general is, I think, what Patrick dedicated some part of his intervention to, is ensuring that the transition is comprehensive, that it is just, and that it is sustainable in the full sense of the word. Because as it is aptly visible in IDFC's logo this year, the elements and the sustainable development goals are trapezoids of equal sizes, and they are on a round circle. So we have to make sure that when we address climate issues, we make sure that the economy continues to grow, that the jobs are there, that the social obligations of the government are met. And this is something that the government has to think about. It has to think about all of these elements. And perhaps this is why the Sustainable Development Agenda was primarily, at least in its UN form, a government-driven agenda, because governments have to take care of all those things at once. And I think transmitting this message and creating the necessary infrastructure for the transition to be sustainable in every sense of the word is the government's job. And if policy banks can introduce that into their frameworks, into their methodologies, into their approach to banking projects, now this would mean that the partnership is there and that it works. So that would be my response.
Thank you very much. Maria, before I will describe what my institution already did in this field, I would like to ask you the questions, how the situation looks in your country or with your institution. Can you enable your partners to be green and clean and transparent?
Yes, it's a huge task, but we all, of course, can do that. I think in both ways. First, be in the capital markets, be greener and fulfill all the green requirements that our multinational are asking us to fulfill. And the other way is to help our financial system, through which we deliver our resources, to be greener and to, again, understand in a better way how green projects have to be and how they have to be presented. And of course, we as a second-tier bank can help the financial system to have a better risk assessment and social assessment. So I think we can be greener as an institutional bank, and we have to help banks to be greener, and of course entrepreneurs to be greener, in order to present better projects and better commitments. And I would like to come back a little bit to the question about KPIs you were asking. And finally, I would like to say that in the case of Bancoldex, we have KPIs in terms of return on equity, of course, but also in terms of impact. And we measure that in terms of green disbursement. So it's not only about what is happening in Bancoldex, but what we are helping to happen in the financial system. And of course, the impact we're generating in entrepreneurs and companies in terms of green sustainable growth.
Thank you very much. Now, I will take you some minutes to describe one of our, I would say, one of our project in terms of methodology. So for some time, it took us, my colleagues, some time to develop a matrix which the title Impact and Responsible Investing for Infrastructure Sustainability, or IRES. So the document or the matrix is good and we can share it with the colleagues. So what we did, we tried to summarize the best approaches in social dimension, in financial dimension, environment dimension. So relying on document already published by our colleagues from EBRD, from European Investment Bank, they are good in different dimensions. So we summarize the thoughts, activity, example of the best activities, and put it this in a special document. I call it matrix for the reason that there are 5 dimensions inside it, and each dimension has scores for special questions. For example, how the project influence local society. It have special score, and how the project influence the environment in this particular region with these particular outcomes in the coming years. So, initiator of the project can do it by itself to make calculations or computations of the answers to questions there, quite around 100 all in all. So, but after this, we have institutions who verify the answers. And finally, after verifications, we have institutions who would certify the answers. So, and final scores will depend what amount of scores the project receive and how we can put it on, promote it to the market for finding necessary financing. So the way that we summarize different aspects of project financing, it helps a lot, both for those who promoting this project or initiate the project, and for those who really wants to fund it, to be an investor into the projects. So it's a big issue for us. So I can repeat myself, we can share our methodology, but maybe after we succeed in promoting it internally, having the final concrete results, how it works in practices. So we have some time to conclude our sessions with very challenging issue, as I believe, the issue which is being entitled the management of climate risks. So it's quite a new topic. We know that, for example, the Financial Stability Board just prepared a roadmap to deal with the risks. They are of different dimensions. Inside my institutions, we still approaching the topic. The team which come after myself for the other working days will be headed by a person who is responsible for risk management inside the bank. So, but he is very frank with myself that it's quite a challenging topic for us, and I believe for many other national or multilateral development banks. So, how the situation looks like in Development Bank of South Africa? Patrick, floor is yours. But have you moved something closer to understanding how climate risk can be calculated, and finally, how can they be managed, having in mind that it's long-term investments and the outcomes, especially having in mind that the climate changes are global issues, not national risk, not only national risk, not only regional risk, not only transverse risk, but much broader. What do you think about this? Can we really produce some kind of methodology to rely on in managing the climate risks?
I think it's work in progress for many. We have a unit that we call financing operations that has got a monitoring and evaluation unit, and they have various processes and tools to look into this. But I know that even engaging with the multilaterals, the MDBs, they are also trying to perfect their system. So it is something that we are still working on, and we are coming up with frameworks. And I know at IDFC as well, we are coming up with the benchmarking so that we can be able to report similarly, so that the information is standardized. But it is something that is quite important that we find ways, because our investors, like the people who buy our bonds, they are holding us to the ESG principles. And how then do we make sure that as an issuer, we are able to look into this, and we are able to look at how we are mitigating those climate risks. But and as South Africa as a country, we are a very water scarce country, and as such, we now need to start looking at how do we begin to start minimizing the wastages, because 60% of our potable water in the country is being used in the agricultural sector. But then what this thing starts to say to us is, how do we start looking at the drip irrigation technologies for agriculture, to make sure that the use in the agricultural sector is sufficient enough for the sustainability of the sector, as well as sustainability of the country. Because you can imagine that if we are able to reduce that, it says we can be able to manage our precious resources much more. But it is, coming back to your question specifically, I would say it's very much work in progress. I don't think there's any institution that has perfected the quantification of climate risk as such. But we all are working quite hard to make sure that there are common benchmarks and there are acceptable metrics and standards to make it easy for the user to understand. And also, it also talks to our disclosures in our financials, the climate-related financial disclosures, so that the users of our financials are able to decipher exactly what we're trying to say and exactly how we're dealing with those kinds of risks. Because at the end of the day, it comes back to impact on the organization and how well we then manage those kinds of risks.
Thank you very much. Beryl, but I understand that the FSB intervention in this field, speaking about roadmap for climate risk, will finally work in the interest of regulators. But who will defend our interests as those who are funding the project, who are really facing climate risk? What do you think about this?
I guess it's all about cooperation and having the same language at some point between our governments, our regulators, and our beneficiary on the ground. And this is the specific role of public development banks, actually, making the link between our governments, our regulators, and our clients. So this would be my answer, and to maybe complement, especially on climate risks. At EFD, we started with physical risks. And we started to understand how physical risks impact our portfolio. And we ended up with a tool that is used actually by our credit officer within the project cycle to really integrate physical risk in our credit risk process. And then we are moving forward with transition risks. And we firstly disclose this year a report that complied with the TCFD recommendations, and we are moving ahead with actually biodiversity. And few weeks ago, actually, there was a launch of the TNFD, so the Task Force for Nature Disclosure, and what is interesting is that within the TNFD there will be a development finance hub, so dedicated really to voicing the specific role of public development banks in biodiversity mainstreaming. So it is interesting that we have this development bank for biodiversity, and that we didn't have at that time for TCFD. So it really demonstrates the increased recognition of development finance in this specific topic, and how we could reconcile everything in a way.
Anton, what about you? Do you think the climate risks are manageable, or just it's something artificial? Well,
No.
and who is supposed to be the main actors in working on methodology, on common language, as my colleagues say? Who, the governments, or those who are really in the fields, who are taking risks by themselves?
No, I think that, well, the climate risks are real, of course, very real. And I think that, again, it has to be a partnership, because it involves those who actually take the risks, but also those who can accurately assess the risks. So it has to be a triangulated sort of system. So this year, my ministry published our methodology for assessing climate risks as part of the National Adaptation Plan. It's mandated. It's a part of the again, the NAP is mandated by the Paris Agreement, and the first stage of the implementation of Russia's National Adaptation Plan includes a measure on providing methodology for assessing climate risks. This is not to say that it covers everything that it needs to cover, but because this is only the beginning of the work. But it's an important document that launches the work in this direction. And I think that this is going to be something that will be required from regulators, from governments, and from development institutions, even more so in the coming years. Because, again, as I think Patrick said, that the recipients of funds will have to understand well what is required of them, how risks are going to be assessed, and what is going to be the impact on whether they will be get the assistance they want from banking institutions or not. And understanding climate risk on all sides of this equation would be very important.
Thank you very much. Maria, floor is yours. How things are developing in your institutions and in your country in terms of understanding the deepness of the climate risks?
Well, finally, and thank you very much for this final question. Here in Colombia, as in South Africa, we are beginning on working in that topic. We are understanding as a bank how we have to address it. how to work on it, how to learn, and how to help the financial system understand that topic. So we are going to be very close to our colleagues, for example, in the IDFC, best practices, and of course, understanding that this will probably be a regulated thing. We as a bank should be ready as soon as possible. So the big thing for now is how to be prepared, and in the meanwhile have a portfolio in order to the companies to adapt and mitigate the climate change. That is what the Bancolix is working on just right now.
Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, we close into to finalize or to finish our session. Thank you very much for your participating in this event. Just my concluding words would be the following. I did my best to switch from the traditional discussions of the role of national development banks in terms of funding, in terms of identification of the bankable projects, and while we discuss it slightly different in different way. I hope that you enjoyed the discussions. Alignment and climate risk, in my opinion, is going to be in the center of the coming discussions this year, next year. So because alignment means a lot, because managing climate risks mean a lot. So we will go on with these discussions, and I wish you all the best during this conference in the coming days and weeks and years. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much.